Okay, imagine this. You're walking through the woods and you encounter an angry grizzly bear. Before you can figure out what to do, it charges right at you. What do you do? Your first thought is probably to slip in behind it and take it down with some impressive wrestling moves. But in the real world, bear attacks don't go over well for the humans involved in them, and despite some videos online showing people wrestling bears to some success, frankly, those bears are either barely trying, tranquilized, or otherwise intoxicated. Which of course leads to the question, what is the biggest animal that you can take in a fight? It's a question that many of us have considered at some point, typically when thinking in a vague, general sense. And when we think of it in that way, we like to think that we have a chance against just about anything. But when you take the issue more seriously, your estimation becomes much more modest. Too modest. Every Reddit thread on the topic has some outrageous takes that imply that without a weapon, you have no chance against any animal, no matter how small. Look, no. Even the most soy-laden Redditor wins in a fight against a squirrel. Stop pretending that animals have some kind of mythical strength, making them unbeatable in a fight with the common man. I promise you, people are capable of winning in a fight with things far larger than a squirrel. But before we tackle the question, we must first define what constitutes a fight. Here, the Redditors come back in full force, insisting that they could definitely take a whale in a fight, so long as it takes place on dry land. And to that I say, really? Yes, it's possible to encounter a whale on land, but how exactly are you going to beat it? The whale is actively dying, yes, but you didn't have anything to do with it. The whale beat itself when it washed up on shore. You just happened to be nearby. For this reason, I'm going to make the first rule that you can't fight any creature that's deathly ill or actively dying, which rules out some other ridiculous suggestions, like a hippopotamus that is blind, shot, and has a brain tumor. Obviously, when an animal is at death's door, you can win in a fight, but you are really only a negligible factor in their death. Speaking of death, rule number 2 is simply that you must incapacitate or kill your opponent to win. That means no points fighting. This helps you with some creatures that are almost entirely pacifistic towards humans. Technically, you could punch a whale shark or a manatee without getting utterly mogged, but you didn't really get any closer to beating them with that punch. The final rule is, of course, no weapons. Simply put, with a gun in hand, a man can defeat almost any creature on this planet, and with a shoulder-fired anti-tank missile, the devil himself would not stand a chance against the sheer firepower we can harness. And for that reason, no weapons are going to be allowed in this contest. Now we can look at which animals people can beat in a fight, and what might surprise you is that much like human fights, it mostly comes down to weight. Animals that weigh around as much as an average person are probably likely to be beatable, while animals that are much larger are probably not beatable. Now, you might be inclined to argue that people can't beat medium-sized predators, but frankly, there's a whole lot of evidence that people can. Dogs, for example, attack people regularly, and people almost always win, unless they're very old, very sick, or very young. Our major advantage is kicking, which can even kill a dog if you're lucky enough. But given proper technique, you can wrestle one as well. Other predators like mid-sized cats have been beaten, although admittedly rarely. The famous story of the jogger that strangled a mountain lion is fairly well known, but there's also an Indian man who saved his family by strangling a leopard to death, and from the pictures, that might be the biggest cat that anyone's beaten without weapons. Back to the chart, the rules for herbivores is pretty well the same. Creatures significantly larger than people, like elephants and horses, hippos and gorillas, are never beatable, while creatures around human-sized, like deer, capybaras, and kangaroos, are probably beatable at least sometimes. As it turns out, there are a lot of videos online of people wrestling deer, and people can win with decent wrestling technique. They need to take control of the antlers and force the animal's head to the ground, and if they do, they typically win. People fighting kangaroos is also a fairly common occurrence online, and while there's no videos of people outright winning by my rule criteria, there are a few that show people holding their own or effectively grappling and striking kangaroos. From what I've seen, a person could beat a medium-sized kangaroo as a 200-ish pound man with wrestling experience, but that's just a guess. Now, there are some exceptions to the weight rule. Porcupines are an obvious example, since there isn't really a way to attack them while unarmed. Some people might add wolverines and chimpanzees as well, since they're disproportionately strong for their size. I've personally seen enough during my research that I believe chimps are probably beatable by some heavyweights, but I'll probably argue that in a later video. People tend to get pretty defensive about how strong chimps are. Birds get destroyed by us almost entirely. Basically, every flying bird is extremely beatable in a fight so long as you can hit it. Here, I think it's worth addressing that some people argue that the biggest animal you can beat in a fight is the Andean condor, since it has an impressive 12-foot wingspan. And while that is cool, I'm inclined to believe the condor doesn't count. We don't rank fighters by their height or their wingspan, we classify them by weight, and the condor is only around 33 pounds. Now, the real threats are the big boys when it comes to birds: ostriches, emus, and cassowaries. Emus and cassowaries can reach around 130 pounds, while North African ostriches can be an enormous 330 pounds. For the longest time, internet discourse was such that people didn't believe that any of these three birds were beatable in a fight. They have sharp claws and strong legs, and despite looking a little silly, cassowaries and ostriches have killed a decent number of people. However, thanks to one video online, we have proof that emus are in fact beatable by humans. Check it out.
The animal shreds the man's pants and rears up to its full massive height. Time to flip the bird. The roadside wrangler goes mano a emu with a flying tackle. Getting help from his lady, he hobbles his prize before it can kick again.
That is still one of my top 5 favorite videos, and it's not even close. Now, cassowaries are similar in size and weight, and this video begs the question: could a human beat a cassowary the same way? Well, maybe not. Cassowaries are more vicious and have sharper, longer talons, and at least 2 people have been killed by cassowaries. Still, I'm inclined to believe that a similar tackle is likely to beat or incapacitate a cassowary in a fight, but it's hard to say. Now, ostriches, on the other hand, are probably not beatable. There are a lot of videos online of people fighting ostriches, and they basically all go the same way. Look at that silly bird, I'm gonna go fight it. Followed immediately by the, oh no, that's a really big bird response. Ostriches kill a few people every year, and while you're certainly more likely to be struck by lightning, death by ostrich is certainly something to have on your radar. I would be a little curious to see how much of the ostrich fighting strength is in its extreme weight. If a 330-pound man fought a 250 to 300-pound ostrich, would it be close or not? They definitely have some natural weapons in their kicking strength and claws, but it's worth noting that they have some clear weak points as well. They have an easily graspable neck and almost the comical weakness of going completely docile when you cover their eyes. If Wings of Redemption wants another boxing match, this is my personal recommendation, though I suspect an ostrich is a more formidable opponent than Boogie was. Now, some creatures are simply inferior to us in every way, and while that sounds like the opening statement to Mein Kampf, in terms of fighting animals, it's just true. Shellfish and crustaceans are just too small to beat us, even if they have some natural weapons. And bugs can rarely be extremely poisonous, but even if they bite you, the worst case scenario should be a draw, with both of you ending up dead. Saying that, all of these creatures are too small to seriously consider in the biggest animal conversation. Now, weighty water creatures are easily broken into fish and mammals, and unfortunately, basically the only way we're going to beat a fish in a fight is by pulling it out of the water. This rules out sharks and large rays, big fish like tuna and ocean sunfish, and basically anything else you can think of that would be heavy enough to challenge for a spot. You can handfish large catfish. In fact, just this year, 2 men caught a 98-pound catfish with just their hands. But in addition to being a 2v1, a 100-pound fish is still much lighter than the other animals on this list, like deer and kangaroos. Mammals are pretty much the same. Whales and dolphins and large seals are all too big, and small seals and otters are beatable, but just not very heavy. And here we get to the end of the list, reptiles and amphibians. And it's here that I believe the largest animal that humans can beat in a fight lies. Crocodiles probably are first to spring to mind since they have the well-known weakness of being unable to open their mouth with the same strength that they can snap it shut. This definitely makes it possible to beat smaller crocodiles, caiman, and alligators, but beyond a certain size, it's just going to drag you into the water and either drown you, or if you let go, it'll eat you. People have also figured out how to wrestle even some of the largest snakes, which is extremely cool. And they might even have an argument for the biggest animal that humans can beat in a fight, if not for the final secret entry on this list. As you've probably guessed, it's the sea turtle. Sea turtles get extremely big, with the largest leatherbacks being over 2,000 pounds, and when they come ashore, they're nearly defenseless, save for their massive size. I've hypothesized two techniques to beat them, one being the patented flipping move, where you just roll it onto its back. I imagine this would be extremely effective, but also probably not work on the biggest turtles, which would be too heavy to flip. My other game plan is a lot simpler, though more brutal. I imagine soccer kicking a sea turtle in the head repeatedly, and mixing it in with some stomping would eventually kill it before it could paddle back to the ocean. Not a fun thought, but that's my theory anyway. In terms of size, I don't think any other creatures could feasibly be beaten that are nearly as heavy as a sea turtle. I played around with the idea of fouling with a whale shark's gills, but I really don't think anything you can do with your hands would seriously injure a whale. And that's about it. If you enjoyed the breakdown, don't leave a like. Instead, go out into the wild and start filming yourself fighting animals. I've already watched every human versus animal fight on the internet, and I need more. Alright, anyway, thanks for watching.